I believe that if a virus can spread across the planet from one person to the other so quickly, that kindness can be more contagious than COVID. It can travel across the globe faster. And I believe that kindness is not only powerful, but it's necessary for the human race to survive, for the planet and all of its creatures to survive. And I think of kindness as a power, not a force. There's a book by, I think his name is David Hawkins, called Power versus Force. And if you think of it, kindness is not a force, because kindness to me, because a force is you're pressing up against something, you're resisting something. And kindness has a different energy. Mother Teresa said, if you hold an anti-war rally, I shall not attend. But if you hold a pro-peace rally, invite me. Why? Because if you are against war, you are still at war in a way, right? And along the same vein, Gandhi said, I am against nothing. I am against nothing. So kindness is powerful, even though it may only look like a gentle word or an action, or it may be only expressed in your heart with a smile, right? I was talking to a friend, Kathleen Farrell, who told me last night that in the movement called Access Consciousness, they say that we must be like smoke through a keyhole, able to open doors in that way. So in that way, that's a power. It's a very strong power, but it's not the force of knocking the door down. It's the gentle force of just going through the keyhole. And Buddhism speaks a lot about the power of kindness. They use it often together in the phrase loving kindness. Loving kindness is the first of the four sublime states in Theravada Buddhism. There's two schools of Buddhism, but I won't get into that. But the four sublime states are loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. And notice that the first three of those have something in common. They're all related to kindness, right? Loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy. And it said those who cultivate these sublime states can be reborn in this lifetime. So as I said earlier, kindness is not always easy. And Connie Habash during her meditation class talked about that dilemma this week as she was talking about Maitri, which is Sanskrit for friendliness. And she said, how can we be kind to everyone and friendly to everyone when there are those people that we may not even like or get along with in our daily lives? How can we be kind and friendly to them? That is a really good question. And she didn't answer that question. It was more of a cone, if you will, or a rhetorical question. But I think of it in my mind as being an opportunity to be neutral and not being hateful, but just coming to neutrality is a way of being kind and not letting someone else rattle your cage. We've all been there. We all can think of someone in our life who has rattled our cage. But when you're against them, you're not only at war with them, but you're at war with yourself somehow. And if you have the choice, certainly there's a choice not to associate with people who drain your energy, who make you angry. I know people who have divorced their own siblings. You may know people as well who have divorced relatives or friends, X'd them out of their lives. But that's not always possible. It's not always productive. And sometimes it can do more harm than good because you have this other thing going on that's unforgiveness, right? But kind does not mean you have to accept what they're doing. It doesn't mean you have to like them. it means you have to be kind to yourself in your own mind, and it means that you have to realize that they are a God being as well. So that's central to, I believe, what we believe as spiritual beings, and that's why we are going to say that opening namaste statement at every service. Because as our congregation grows, there are going to be people that come in and out with different ideas. There are going to be people that come in and out that you may not necessarily like. But if we can relate to them from our God self to their God selves, then we can have a peace of mind. We can have a loving kindness without necessarily a liking or an approval of. And I hope that makes sense. Being kind in this world can be draining in other ways. And there is truly a fatigue that can happen. There's a phrase called compassion fatigue, which I didn't hear about until Donna mentioned this to me the other day. And I did some research on it. And it was born out of the healing professions. It was born out of doctors and lawyers. Well, are lawyers in there? I don't know. Doctors and nurses and caregivers and therapists. Anyone in a helping profession can go through something called compassion fatigue. But this article that I read said that compassion fatigue is not only something that can strike those helping professions, but as the pandemic continues, and as the 24-hour news cycle brings up nonstop news of suffering around the world, we are all at risk of this thing called compassion fatigue. Think about that. Physiologically, human beings, for the vast amount of our existence, have been accustomed to only caring about our family units and our villages. And that as things expanded even to cities that were very largely populated, we weren't getting news from across the world. It was only very recently, with the advent of the printing press and radio, and now, and then very recently, relatively speaking, 24-hour news and social media, we hear about something bad that goes on 10,000 miles away on the other side of the planet very quickly. So we become overwhelmed with all this bad news. According to this website called Banner Health, the hallmarks of compassion fatigue, and you may ask yourself if this applies to you at all. Compassion fatigue can be recognized as feeling exhausted physically and mentally, feeling helpless, hopeless, or powerless about a situation, feeling irritable or angry or sad or numb. Here's one that really rang true for me: ruminating about the suffering of others and feeling anger towards the events that caused that suffering to happen. Blaming yourself and having thoughts about not having done enough to help the people that are suffering. So I could go on, but you get the idea about compassion fatigue. And we should care about this as spiritual people, because we care about compassion. We care about kindness, because it's another name for love, isn't it? So here are a few steps recommended by Banner Health to alleviate some of this compassion fatigue that may be happening in your life. They say, first, to follow self-care routines. So just take care of yourself, put on your own mask first, get enough sleep, eat right, exercise, and nurture your social relationships. Next, avoid information overload and exposing yourself to traumatic situations that may be affecting you, i.e., stop watching the news for a while. I know some people, and you may too, that just don't watch the news. Michael Beckwith said one time, he does not watch the news because if there's something big that's happening, someone's going to tell him about it. The next is engage in activities that replenish and rejuvenate you. The next is understanding that suffering and pain are a part of the collective human condition, and that you don't always have to control it or do something about it. This sounds very Buddhist, because those of you who have studied Buddhism, it's one of the four truths: suffering. There will always be suffering to some degree. And finally, a way to alleviate some of this compassion fatigue is focusing on the areas that you do have control over. And this is kind of the premise of my talk today, is when we feel that compassion fatigue, is to narrow your scope of care down to compassion for yourself, compassion for one other human being in small ways that are still mighty, right? And not have to worry about what we're going to do with the thousands of people that are suffering in and more in almost every country you can think about. So focus on areas you have control over, including your thoughts and feelings, rather than having unrealistic expectations that you're going to be changing things that might be on your immediate control. And think of this contagion effect. If I am not friendly, if I am not kind to myself and my neighbors, how is that ever going to spread around the world to reach universal kindness? So let's begin with us. So how can we cultivate this kindness in a way that uplifts and definitely doesn't burn us out? How do we begin? And about a year and a half ago, sorry, Deanna loaned me this book. This is actually a book that Unity produced that has well over 100 recommendations for how we can be kind. And I also have to thank Francine for compiling this book. That's quite, it must have taken months to put all this together. And I wanted to read a few things that stuck out to me out of these 100 ideas. I will read a few. First of all, here are simple ideas called kindness ideas. Pay for the person behind you in a drive-through or in line at the coffee shop. Be kind to someone you dislike. Cook a meal for someone. Let a fellow driver merge into your lane. Even thinking of them as fellow drivers, that's an interesting way. You're showing compassion already by thinking of them as a fellow driver on the roadway. The next one is pick up litter somewhere. The next is simply say, I'm sorry when you're wrong. Adopt a pet from an animal shelter or volunteer for an animal shelter. A few more. Write a letter to someone who made a difference in your life, or write an email. Donate school supplies to a local school and ask them to provide them to a family in need. Serve at a homeless shelter. Give someone a compliment. Participate in a fundraiser. And the list goes on and on and on. I'm sure you can think of many. I'm sure you do many of these. And Deanna, if you could, after service, when we're sharing, if you could talk about how Namaste is helping seniors through Heart of the Valley to put together the stocking stuffers, I'd appreciate that, because Namaste, kindness is built into that name, and they do these service projects that are fantastic. So I'm going to finish by, I tagged a few quotes inside of here that stuck out to me out of these 100. The first is, kindness is giving hope to those who think they are all alone in the world. We don't have to agree on anything to be kind to one another. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. One act of kindness won't change the world, but it may change one person's world. When given the choice between being right and kind, choose kind. And Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness. And finally, in the end, all that matters is kindness. How you treat yourself and all living things makes a difference. So you can see that all of these are pretty simple. And I will add a few of my own. This one is based upon the complaint-free world. And it's basically be kind when no one sees it, by not complaining, choosing not to complain about someone. And by doing that, you are rendering an act of kindness that the person won't even know about, but that person is benefiting and you're benefiting, and you're both helping to create a better world. To me, that's really powerful. Making that decision not to complain about a person, not to belittle a person, not to hold someone in contempt, not to criticize a person. The next one is be the first one to be kind. Especially if you're in an argument with someone, be the first to say, I'm sorry. It's not easy to do because once again, it takes this behavior of wanting to be right, and it prioritizes over that wanting to be kind. So I want to finish with the reading from Pema Chodron that Betsy began with, as well as the service I began, as well as the prayer I began service with. So the reading from Pema Chodron is called Cultivate Loving Kindness Toward Yourself. Some people find that the teachings I offer are helpful because I encourage them to be kind to themselves. The kindness that I learned from my teachers and that I wish so much to convey to other people is kindness toward all qualities of our being. The qualities that are the toughest to be kind to are the painful parts, where we feel ashamed, as if we don't belong, as if we've just blown it, when things are falling apart for us. During these times, loving kindness means sticking with ourselves when we don't have anything, when we feel like a loser. And it becomes the basis for extending the same unconditional friendliness to others. So that's Pema Chodron. And now for the closing prayer, which was also the opening prayer. Let's go within for a moment. Let's just think about one of these ways of kindness that we have done. Let's think about our intention for kindness and include ourselves in that intention. Today, we move out beyond ideas of right and wrong. Today, we move out beyond ideology. Today, we think of simple kindness. The first is a simple kindness to ourselves, where the school of kindness does its best teaching. And the next is a simple kindness towards one other human, wherever and whoever this other may be. This is where our power of kindness becomes mighty, especially in the gentle kindness that is done in the smallest of ways. For this I'm grateful, and so it is.
One day, one day, one day. One day, all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for our people to say that we don't want to fight no more, there'll be no more war, and our children will play. One day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. All my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for our people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play. One day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day.